I still remember the week my grandfather stopped leaving his house. It was January of 1909, and I was 8 years old, living with my parents in a small row house in Camden, New Jersey. My grandfather lived 3 blocks away, above his tobacco shop on Market Street. Every Sunday, without fail, he would walk to our house for dinner. He'd been doing it for as long as I could remember. But that Sunday, January 17th, he didn't come. My father went to check on him that evening. It was maybe 2 or 3 in the morning. I woke up to a sound I'd never heard before. It started far away like a scream, but not quite human, not quite animal either. It got closer, moving fast, and then it was directly over our house. Something landed on our roof. I could hear it moving up there, not walking, more like hopping or dragging something. The ceiling above my bed creaked. Then there was a scratching sound, like claws on shingles. I was too scared to move. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to it move back and forth. Back and forth. Then it screamed again, so loud and so close that I felt it in my chest. And it was gone. I heard it moving away. That same horrible shriek, getting fainter, and then silence. In the morning, there were scratches on the roof. Deep ones. My father went up with a ladder to look and came down without saying a word. Wednesday and Thursday were like that. The thing came every night. Sometimes it would land on our roof. Sometimes I would just hear it passing overhead. Sometimes I would see shadows moving past my window that were too large and the wrong shape. The newspaper said there was a dangerous animal loose. They said people were seeing things because of hysteria, but I saw my father sitting up all night in the parlor with a rifle across his lap. I saw my mother refuse to open the curtains during the day. I saw grown men walking in groups down the middle of the street, all of them carrying guns or axes or heavy tools. Friday afternoon, my father came home early from work. He'd been working at the shipyard, but they'd closed it down. Too many men refusing to walk to work in the dark. "How long is this going to last?" my mother asked him. "I don't know," he said, "but it can't go on forever." He was wrong about that. It went on for 3 more days. Saturday night was the worst. The thing didn't just pass over, it stayed. For hours, I could hear it on the roof, moving around, scratching, making that awful sound that was almost like laughter, almost like crying. At one point, something heavy dragged across the roof directly above the parlor. It sounded like it was pacing. My father stood in the middle of the room with his rifle, aiming at the ceiling, but he never fired. What would be the point? It was on the other side of the roof, and the noise kept moving. Around 4 in the morning, it finally left. Sunday, my father went to check on grandfather. I asked to come with him. He said no at first, but I think he didn't want to walk alone. So he let me. The streets were a mess. There were tracks everywhere in the snow. Some of them were normal boots, wagon wheels, but others were these strange cloven prints. They went in impossible directions, up walls, across rooftops, in perfect straight lines over fences and through yards. Grandfather's shop was dark. My father knocked for a long time before he answered. When the door finally opened, my grandfather looked like he'd aged 10 years. His eyes were hollow and his hands were shaking. "It's over," my father told him. "It hasn't been seen since last night." "You don't know that," grandfather said. "You can't know that." But he was wrong. That was the last night. The thing, whatever it was, never came back. By Monday, the newspapers were already calling it mass hysteria. By Tuesday, the police were saying there had been a dangerous animal that had since moved on. By Wednesday, people were starting to go back to their normal routines, though nobody walked alone after dark for months. I'm an old man now. That was over a century ago. I've lived through 2 world wars, the Depression, more loss than I care to remember. I've seen terrible things and beautiful things and everything in between, but I still remember that week in January when something moved through Camden, New Jersey, and nobody could explain what it was or where it went. Sometimes late at night, when the house is very quiet, I think I hear something on the roof, just for a moment, just long enough to remind me that there are things we never understood and never will. My grandfather never left his house after dark again, Not once. Not in the 20 years he lived after that week. And I don't think I ever asked him why. When he came back, his face had this strange look I'd never seen before. Not worried exactly, more like he was trying very hard to appear calm. "He's fine," my father said. "Just feeling under the weather." My mother asked if we should bring him soup. My father said no. He said grandfather wanted to be left alone for a few days. Then he went into a study and closed the door, which he never did. I didn't think much of it at the time. Children accept what they're told. But then I started noticing things. The next morning, walking to school, I saw Mr. Hendricks from the hardware store boarding up his shop windows. It was a Monday morning. The store should have been opening. When I asked him why, he just looked at me for a long moment and said, "You go straight to school, boy." Straight there and straight home. At school, half the students were missing. Mrs. Patterson, my teacher, kept looking out the window during lessons. She would stop mid-sentence sometimes, just staring at the glass before catching herself and continuing. During lunch, I heard two older boys talking in the corner of the yard. One of them said his father had seen something on the roof of the factory the night before. Something with wings. The other boy told him to shut up, but his voice was shaking when he said it. I walked home alone that day. The streets were quieter than usual. There were people around, but they moved quickly, heads down. No one was standing on corners talking like they normally did. The ice wagon passed me without stopping at any houses. When I got home, my mother was in the kitchen with Mrs. Delacroix from next door. They stopped talking the moment I walked in. Mrs. Delacroix left immediately, barely saying goodbye. That night, I woke up to voices downstairs. It was past midnight. I could hear my father and several other men in the parlor. Their voices were low but urgent. I crept to the top of the stairs and listened. "Footprints in the snow on my roof," one man was saying. "I'm telling you, they weren't human. They were." "Keep your voice down," my father interrupted. "My wife saw it," another voice said. "Clear as day, perched on the fence behind our house." She said it turned and looked right at her. "What did the police say?" my father asked. "They're not saying anything, but there were 6 officers out on Federal Street tonight. All armed." There was a long silence. Then someone said very quietly, "My brother works at the newspaper. They're getting reports from all over. Bristol, Gloucester, Bridgeton. It's not just Camden." I must have made a sound because suddenly my father was at the bottom of the stairs looking up at me. His face was very pale. "Go back to bed," he said. Not angry, almost gentle. I did, but I didn't sleep. The next day, Tuesday, school was closed. No explanation was given. My mother wouldn't let me leave the house. When I asked why, she just said, "Not today." I spent most of the morning looking out my bedroom window. The street was nearly empty, but around noon, I saw something that made my stomach feel strange. There were tracks in the snow in our yard. I'd been looking at that yard all morning, and I knew those tracks hadn't been there before. They came from the direction of the alley, crossed our yard, went up the side of the house, and just ended at the wall, about 10 feet up. I went downstairs and asked my father about them. He was sitting in the parlor reading the newspaper. When I told him about the tracks, he folded the paper very carefully and set it down. "Stay inside," he said. "But what made them?" "I don't know. Should we tell someone?" He looked at me for a long moment. "Everyone already knows," he said. That night, I heard it for the first time. I need to tell you about my father, not because I want to, not because it brings me any peace, but because I'm the only one left who remembers what it was like before, and I think someone should know. My name is Thomas Lindbergh Jr., and I was 4 years old when my brother was taken. We lived in a large house near Hopewell, New Jersey. It sat alone on 390 acres of land, surrounded by woods. My father was the most famous man in America, probably. She would stand in the hallway sometimes, staring at Charlie's closed door. I asked her once if Charlie was coming back. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "I hope so, sweetheart." But her eyes said something else. My father left the house every day. I didn't know where he went. Years later, I learned he'd been meeting with a man named John Condon, who was negotiating with whoever took Charlie. They would meet in cemeteries late at night. My father would sit in the car while Condon talked to a man in the shadows who called himself John. On April 2nd, my father came home very late. I heard him talking to my mother in their room. He said he'd paid the ransom, $50,000. He said they were told Charlie was on a boat called Nellie near Martha's Vineyard. My mother asked when we could go get him. My father didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Soon." But there was no boat. There was no Charlie on Martha's Vineyard. There was nothing. I remember my father's face when he came back from that trip. He looked like something inside him had broken. May 12th, 1932. I was playing in my room when I heard the cars pull up. Multiple cars, police cars. I went to the window and saw officers getting out, and they all had their hats in their hands. And that's how I knew. Even at 4 years old, I knew what it meant when men took their hats off like that before walking into someone's house. I heard my mother scream. It was the only time I ever heard her scream like that, like an animal caught in a trap. Betty ran past my room toward the stairs, and I followed her even though I wasn't supposed to. The police were in the foyer with my father. One of them was talking, very quietly, and my father was just staring at nothing. 4.5 miles from here, the officer was saying. In the woods. "We found him this afternoon. I'm so sorry, Colonel Lindbergh. I'm so sorry." My mother came down the stairs. She looked at my father. He met her eyes and just shook his head once. She collapsed, just folded up and fell, and Betty caught her. I stood on the stairs, holding the banister, trying to understand what was happening. My father looked up and saw me. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he walked over, picked me up, and carried me back to my room. He set me down on my bed and knelt in front of me. "Your brother isn't coming home," he said. "Where is he?" "He's gone." "Where did he go?" My father's jaw tightened. "Someone hurt him, Thomas. Someone took him and hurt him, Thomas. Someone took him and hurt him, and now he's gone." I didn't cry. I don't know why. Maybe I was too young to fully understand. Maybe I was in shock. I just nodded. My father stood up and walked to the door. Then he stopped and looked back at me. "I'm going to find who did this," he said. "I promise you that." And he did. 2 years later, in September 1934, they arrested a man named Bruno Hauptmann. He'd been spending the ransom money. They found more of it hidden in his garage, along with wood that matched the ladder and all sorts of other evidence. The trial started on January 2nd, 1935 in Flemington. I was 7 years old by then. My parents went every day. I stayed with Betty and my aunt. I remember my father coming home each night getting more and more tense. He never talked about what he heard in court, never talked about the evidence or the testimony. He would just sit in his study with the door closed. My mother stopped sleeping. I would hear her walking the halls at night, and sometimes I would wake up and find her standing in the doorway of what used to be Charlie's nursery, just looking into the empty room. The trial lasted 6 weeks. On February 13th, they found Hauptmann guilty. I remember my father coming home that night. He didn't look relieved. He didn't look satisfied. He just looked tired. "Did they find who took Charlie?" I asked him. "Yes." "Is he going to jail?" My father looked at me. "He's going to die, Thomas." I thought that would make things better. I thought once the man who killed my brother was punished, everything would go back to normal. But nothing went back to normal. We moved away from Hopewell. My mother couldn't stand being in that house anymore. We went to Europe for a while, trying to escape the attention. But even there, people recognized my father. Bruno Hauptmann was executed on April 3rd, 1936. I was 8. My father didn't talk about it. Didn't celebrate. Didn't say anything at all. Years later, when I was older, I asked him if he thought Hauptmann did it. He was quiet for a long time. He'd flown across the Atlantic Ocean alone in 1927, and after that, everything changed for our family. We couldn't go anywhere without crowds. Photographers would hide in the woods near our house. Reporters would hide in the woods near our house. Reporters would call at all hours. My mother once found a man in our barn who said he just wanted to see where Charles Lindbergh kept his car. That's why they built the house so far from everything. For privacy. For safety. I remember the house being cold that winter. Then he said, I identified him as the man in the cemetery. The wood matched. The money was in his garage. He was guilty. But do you think he acted alone? My father looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. I think some questions don't have good answers. I'm an old man now. Charlie would have been 93 if he'd lived. I've spent my whole life being Charles Lindbergh's other son, the one who survived, the one people forgot about. I've read all the books about the kidnapping, all the theories. Some people think Hauptmann was innocent. Some think my father was involved. Some think it was the mob, or a rival aviator, or a dozen other things. I don't know what the truth is. I was 4 years old, but I remember things nobody puts in the books. I remember how my father changed after Charlie died, how he became cold and distant, how he started saying things about genetics and superior bloodlines, things that made my mother look away. I remember my mother telling me years later that she never believed Charlie died the night he was taken. She said the coroner told her he'd been dead for at least 2 months when they found him, meaning he died that first night, but she never believed it. She thought he'd been alive somewhere, crying for her, and she hadn't been able to find him. I remember the house in Hopewell burning down in 1972. Arson, they said, but they never found who did it. I drove past the property once after that. It was just empty land, like nothing had ever been there at all. I'm telling you this because I'm 89 years old, and soon there won't be anyone left who remembers what it was like to be in that house, to hear my mother scream, to see my father's face when he realized his fame couldn't protect his children. They called it the crime of the century. They wrote books and made movies and turned my brother into a symbol. But Charlie wasn't a symbol. He was 20 months old. He had a cough that winter. Betty would sing to him before bed. He was learning to walk, and someone climbed a ladder to his window on a windy Tuesday night and took him out into the darkness. And whatever happened after that in those hours or days before they killed him, nobody knows. I still think about that sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep. I think about my brother, alone and scared, crying for our mother, and nobody came. We had radiators, but the rooms were large and the ceilings were high, and there was always a draft coming from somewhere. My brother Charles Way, called him Charlie, had the nursery on the second floor, southeast corner. I slept in a smaller room down the hall. March 1st, 1932 was a Tuesday. I remember it was windy that day, the kind of wind that makes the whole house creak and settle. My mother had a cold, so we'd stayed home from our usual weekend trip to her parents' house in Englewood. Charlie had a cold too. I could hear him coughing through the walls at night. Betty Gow, his nurse, had put him to bed around 8 o'clock. I saw her in the hallway afterward. She had this little smile the way she always did when Charlie went down without fussing. I was supposed to be in bed too, but I'd been reading with a flashlight under my covers. I did that sometimes. My mother knew but pretended she did. Around 9:30, I heard my mother walking down the hall toward the nursery. Her footsteps stopped. Then I heard her voice, but I couldn't make out the words. Then Betty's voice, higher, faster. Then my father's footsteps running up the stairs. I got out of bed and opened my door just a crack. I could see into Charlie's room from there. The window was open. The white curtains were blowing in the wind. Betty was standing in the middle of the room, her hand over her mouth. My mother was checking the closet, the bathroom, under the crib, moving frantically. My father was just standing in the doorway, very still, looking at the empty crib. "Call the police," he said quietly. I didn't understand what was happening. I thought maybe Charlie had climbed out and was hiding somewhere. He couldn't really climb yet, but I was 4. I didn't know what babies could and couldn't do. But then my father saw the note. It was on the windowsill, held down by the latch. He picked it up carefully, read it, and his face changed. I'd never seen my father look scared before. He was a pilot, a hero. He wasn't supposed to look like that. He said something to my mother I couldn't hear, and she made a sound like all the air had gone out of her. That's when I knew Charlie wasn't hiding. The police came fast. Our phone was one of the few in the area, and my father had made the call himself. By midnight, there were men everywhere. State police, local police, men in suits I didn't recognize. They had dogs and flashlights and cameras. Someone found the ladder outside below Charlie's window. It was made of wood, crude, with one rung broken. There were footprints in the mud, but the ground was soft and they couldn't make out much detail. They wouldn't let me out of my room after that. A police officer stood in my doorway all night. He was young, maybe 25, and he kept looking down the hall toward Charlie's room like he expected to see something. I heard my father's voice downstairs talking to someone. He sounded different, harder. He kept saying, "I'll handle this myself. I'll get my son back." Days went by like that. I wasn't allowed to go to school. I wasn't allowed outside. Reporters camped at the end of our long driveway. Sometimes I would look out my window and see them standing there with cameras, just waiting. My mother stayed in her room mostly. Betty stayed with us, but she looked like she hadn't slept. I worked as a surveyor for the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection from 1998 to 2006. Most of that time was spent in the Pine Barrens, marking boundaries, updating maps, documenting trails. It was good work, quiet, the kind of job where you could go days without seeing another person. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand. I knew those woods. I knew them better than almost anyone. I knew which trails looped back on themselves, which old roads were still passable, where the cranberry bogs gave way to deep forest. By 1 o'clock, we'd found the fourth marker. We stopped for lunch, sitting on a fallen log, eating the sandwiches we packed. Kevin was quieter than usual. I asked if something was wrong. "You hear that?" he asked. I listened. "Hear what?" "Exactly. No birds. No squirrels. Nothing." He was right. The woods had gone completely silent. In my years working the Pine Barrens, I'd noticed that silence meant something. Usually a predator nearby, a fox or coyote. Animals go quiet when something dangerous is close. But we'd been sitting there for 10 minutes and the silence hadn't lifted. "Let's finish up," I said. We packed our lunch trash and headed for the fifth and final marker. According to our maps, it should have been about half a mile northeast, near a small stream that ran through the property. We never found it. What we found instead was a truck. It was about 100 yards off the trail, partially hidden by undergrowth. Old, maybe from the 70s, faded blue paint, no license plates. The tires were flat, rotted away. The windows were intact but filthy. Kevin and I looked at each other. This wasn't on any of our maps. Abandoned vehicles in the Pine Barrens weren't uncommon. People dumped things out there all the time, but this truck was far from any road. There was no way it could have been driven to this location. "Should we check it out?" Kevin asked. I didn't want to. I'm not sure why. But I said yes anyway. We approached carefully. The driver's side door was unlocked. Kevin opened it slowly, and the smell hit us immediately. Not decomposition, this truck had been here too long for that, but mildew and rot and something else, something chemical. The inside was empty. No seats, no dashboard, nothing. It had been completely gutted. But in the truck bed, under a rotted tarp, we found something. Plastic sheeting. Lots of it. Still packaged, wrapped in heavy-duty contractor bags. And next to the sheeting, a bag of zip ties. And a shovel. And a battery-powered drill with drill bits still attached. Kevin backed away from the truck. "We need to call this in." "Yeah." I pulled out my radio to call our supervisor. No signal. Too deep in the woods. I tried my cell phone. Same thing. No service. "We'll report it when we get back to the truck," I said. Kevin nodded, but he looked pale. We started walking back the way we'd come. Neither of us spoke. The silence in the woods felt heavier now, oppressive. Every snap of a twig, every rustle in the undergrowth made us both jump. After about 20 minutes, Kevin stopped. "This isn't right," he said. "What? We should have hit the trail by now. We've been walking for 20 minutes. I checked my GPS. He was right. According to the GPS, we should have crossed the trail 10 minutes ago. But there was no trail, just endless pine trees and undergrowth." "We got turned around," I said. "It happens." But it didn't happen. Not to me. I'd been navigating the Pine Barrens for years. I didn't get lost. I checked the GPS again, oriented myself, and we adjusted our direction. 10 more minutes of walking. Still no trail. Kevin was starting to panic. I could hear it in his breathing. "Where the fuck is the trail?" "It's here. We just need to We've been walking for half an hour. The trail is not here." I checked the GPS again. According to the device, we were standing directly on top of the trail, but there was nothing but trees. That's when I noticed the boot prints again. They were everywhere now, in every direction, crisscrossing through the undergrowth, circling trees, appearing and disappearing. Some of them were the same prints we'd seen earlier, but some were different. Some were much larger, and some didn't look quite right. The tread pattern was wrong, or the depth was too deep, or they were spaced too far apart. "Someone's fucking with us," Kevin said. "How? We haven't seen anyone." "I don't know, but someone is fucking with us." I tried the radio again. Still nothing. I tried my phone. Nothing. We kept walking. The GPS said we were heading toward our truck, so we followed it. But the terrain wasn't right. The ground started to slope downward, and there shouldn't have been any slopes in this section. The trees got denser, the undergrowth thicker, and then we heard it. A sound in the distance, like metal scraping against metal. Rhythmic, deliberate. We both froze. The sound continued for maybe 30 seconds, then stopped, then started again from a different direction. "What is that?" Kevin whispered. I didn't answer. I didn't know. We started moving again, faster now, pushing through the undergrowth. The GPS kept saying we were getting closer to the truck, but nothing looked familiar. Nothing felt right. Then Kevin grabbed my arm. "Look." Ahead of us, maybe 50 yards away, was another clearing. I knew the Pine Barrens weren't some horror movie setting. They were just woods. 1,000,000 acres of pine and oak and sandy soil, just woods. My partner's name was Kevin Marsh. We'd been working together for 3 years by January 2001. Good guy, methodical. The kind of person who triple-checked his measurements and actually read the equipment manuals. We'd developed an easy rhythm. I'd handle the GPS and documentation. He'd handle the physical surveying equipment. January 23, 2001, we got assigned to update boundary markers in a remote section of Wharton State Forest off Chew Road. And in the clearing was a shape, large, blue, a truck. We ran toward it. It was our truck. I was sure of it. Same model, same color. But when we got close, I realized it wasn't. The license plate was different. The interior was wrong. And when I looked in the truck bed, I saw the same thing we'd seen in the abandoned truck. Plastic sheeting, zip ties, tools. Kevin made a sound like he was going to be sick. "We need to go," I said. "Now." We ran. I don't know which direction. I just ran, and Kevin ran with me. The GPS was useless now. I wasn't even looking at it. We just crashed through the undergrowth, branches hitting our faces, our gear rattling. And behind us, somewhere in the trees, I heard footsteps. Heavy footsteps. Running. We didn't stop. We didn't look back. We just ran until my lungs were burning and my legs felt like they would give out. And then, suddenly, we broke through the tree line onto Chew Road. Our truck was there. Right there. Exactly where we left it. We threw our gear in the bed and got in. Kevin was shaking so hard he couldn't get his seatbelt on. I started the engine and drove. I didn't stop driving until we were back on a paved highway with other cars around us. We didn't talk about what happened. Not on the drive back. Not when we got to the office. We just filed our report saying we'd completed 4 of the 5 boundary markers and recommended a follow-up survey for the 5th. We didn't mention the abandoned trucks or the boot prints or getting lost. The next day, I called the state police and anonymously reported the location of the abandoned truck with the supplies in it. I gave them GPS coordinates. They said they'd send someone to check it out. 3 days later, I called back to follow up. They said no truck had been found at those coordinates, just forest. They sent an officer out there. He walked the entire area. Nothing. Kevin quit 2 weeks later. He said it was for personal reasons. He moved to Pennsylvania. I tried calling him once, but he didn't answer. I kept working the pine barrens for 5 more years. I never went back to that section of Wharton State Forest. Whenever I was assigned to that area, I'd trade assignments with someone else. I retired in 2006. I live in Lakewood now. Safe, suburban. But sometimes I still think about those boot prints. How they were everywhere, circling us, and we never saw who made them. And I think about that GPS saying we were standing on the trail when there was no trail. And I think about how easy it would have been for us to never find our way out. Sometimes I look at maps of the Pine Barrens, satellite images, trying to find that clearing. That second truck. Any evidence that what we saw was real? I've never found it, but I know it's out there, somewhere in those million acres of trees, waiting for someone else to find it. It was state land, protected, but it backed up against some private property that had recently changed hands. The new owner wanted confirmation of where his land ended and state forest began. Simple job. Should have taken us 4, maybe 5 hours. We left the office in Trenton around 7 in the morning. It was cold that day, mid-20s, but clear. No snow predicted. Kevin brought coffee in a thermos. I remember he was complaining about his daughter's college applications, how expensive everything was getting. Normal conversation. Normal day. We reached the access point off Chew Road around 9:15. There was a dirt road that went in about half a mile before it became impassable to vehicles. We parked the truck and loaded up our gear. GPS unit, surveying equipment, flags, spray paint, 2-way radios, the usual. The plan was to hike in about 2 miles, locate the old boundary markers, confirm their positions, and mark the line clearly for the property owner. The terrain was typical pine barren sandy soil, pitch pine, oak undergrowth, very flat, easy walking. We set out around 9:30. For the first hour, everything was normal. We were following an old trail, barely visible but still there if you knew what to look for. Kevin was telling me about a fishing trip he was planning for spring. The woods were quiet, the way they usually are in winter. No birds singing, just the sound of our boots and our breathing. Around 10:40, we reached the first marker we were looking for. It was an old concrete post, probably from the 1960s, half buried and tilted. I logged the GPS coordinates while Kevin set up the transit to confirm the boundary line. That's when I noticed the boot prints. They were in a patch of sandy soil about 10 feet from the marker, fresh. I could tell because we'd had rain 2 days before, and these prints were on top of the compressed, dried sand. "Someone else out here?" Kevin asked, looking over my shoulder. "Looks like it." We both scanned the woods around us. Nothing. No sound of anyone moving through the brush. No voices. "Probably hunters," Kevin said. "Hunting season ended 2 weeks ago." He shrugged. "Poachers then, not our problem." He was right. It wasn't our problem. We were there to mark boundaries, not enforce hunting regulations. I made a note of it anyway, habit, and we continued working. We found the second marker around 11:30. This one was in better shape, a metal stake driven deep into the ground. While Kevin was taking measurements, I walked the line between the 2 markers, looking for any other old markers that might have been missed in previous surveys. That's when I found the first odd thing. There was a clearing about 30 yards off the boundary line. Not a natural clearing, the trees had been cut. Not recently, maybe 5 or 10 years ago, but deliberately. The stumps were still visible, and in the center of the clearing was a fire pit. Old, cold, but definitely used. And around the fire pit were more boot prints, lots of them, different sizes. I called Kevin over. We both stood there, looking at it. "Homeless camp?" he suggested. Out here? This is miles from anything. Kids partying? Maybe. But something about it felt wrong. The fire pit was too carefully constructed. The clearing was too deliberate. And there was something else, something I couldn't quite articulate. The area felt used. Regularly used. We should report it, I said. Kevin checked his watch. We've got 3 more markers to find. We can report it when we get back. We returned to the boundary line and kept working. I was a patrol officer for the Atlantic City Police Department for 11 years. I saw a lot in that time. Overdoses, domestics, gang violence, the usual chaos of a city that never really sleeps. You develop a thick skin. You learn to compartmentalize. You go home and you don't think about what you saw. But there's one case I never stopped thinking about. January 12th, 1984. I was 26 years old, 3 years on the force. I was working day shift that Thursday, cruising the neighborhoods east of the boardwalk. By noon Friday, we'd searched a 10-block radius. Nothing. That afternoon, a detective named Kowalski took over the case. He was good, experienced, methodical. He interviewed everyone again. The friends who played with Gary Jr. Both said the same thing. Gary left around 4:30, heading home. They watched him walk to the corner and turn. Then they went back inside. Nobody saw anything after that corner. Kowalski ordered a more detailed search of the route Gary Jr. would have taken. Every yard, every building, every vehicle parked on the street that day. We went door to door again, asking if anyone had seen anything unusual. A strange car, an unfamiliar person. Anything. Nothing. Saturday morning, I was assigned to search an area of abandoned lots on North California Avenue. It was maybe 4 blocks from the Grant House. The lots were overgrown with weeds, filled with trash and old furniture people had dumped there. Not a place kids usually played. I was working with another officer named Rodriguez. We were moving methodically through the lots, checking behind piles of trash, looking for any sign. Around 10:30, Rodriguez called out, "Over here." I walked over. He was standing near the back corner of one of the lots, staring down at something in the weeds. I saw the blue jacket first. "Don't touch anything," I said, and I called it in. The crime scene unit arrived within 20 minutes. The medical examiner came shortly after. They cleared everyone back, put up tape, started processing the scene. I stood there watching, feeling numb. Gary Grant Jr. had been there the whole time. Less than half a mile from his house, in a place we'd probably walked past a dozen times in the past 2 days. I wasn't part of the scene processing, but I heard things. I heard the ME telling Kowalski that the boy had been beaten. Severely. Blunt force trauma to the head. Multiple strikes. He'd been dead since Thursday. Since the day he disappeared. Someone had beaten a 7-year-old boy to death and left him in an abandoned lot. And then we'd spent 2 days searching while his body lay there, 50 yards from where we were coordinating the search. I had to tell Gary Sr. I volunteered to do it. I don't know why. Maybe because I'd been there from the beginning. Maybe because he was a fellow officer. Maybe because I thought it should come from someone he knew. I drove to the house. Mrs. Grant answered the door. One look at my face and she knew. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just folded up, right there in the doorway, like someone had cut her strings. Gary Sr. was behind her. He caught her as she fell. He looked at me over her shoulder. "Where?" he asked. "California Avenue. The abandoned lots." His face didn't change. "Is he?" "Yes." He closed his eyes, just for a moment. Then he opened them again, and they were empty. Completely empty. "I need to see him." "Gary, you don't..." "I need to see my son." The ME allowed it, against protocol, but Gary Sr. was a cop, and his 7-year-old son had just been found murdered. Nobody was going to deny him. I drove him there. He didn't speak the entire way, just stared out the window. At the scene, the ME pulled back the sheet just enough. Gary Sr. looked down at his son's face for a long moment. Then he nodded once and turned away. He walked back to my patrol car, got in the passenger seat, and sat there. I didn't know what to say. There was nothing to say. Finally, he spoke. Someone killed him because of me. What? This wasn't random. Someone killed my son because of something I did, something I was involved in. Someone wanted to hurt me. Gary, you don't know that. Yes, I do. And maybe he was right, because almost 2 years later, the messages started appearing. January 1986. Someone scratched a message onto a police car windshield. Gary Grant is dead. I am living. Another will die on 112H86 if all goes right. A few weeks later, another message appeared on a sidewalk. Gary Grant Jr. lives. I still killed him. Son of a pig officer. Payback is IMF. They arrested someone. An emotionally disturbed individual who had some contact with the Grant family. The evidence was circumstantial, the handwriting, the messages, some other details that were never made public. They charged him with the murder. The case fell apart. Technical issues, evidentiary problems. The charges were dismissed. Gary Sr. never recovered. I'd see him sometimes at the station, and he was like a ghost. He went through the motions, but there was nothing behind his eyes. He eventually transferred to another department. I heard he retired early. I don't know where he is now. Mrs. Grant moved away. Couldn't stay in Atlantic City anymore. Too many memories. Too many streets where her son used to play. The case is still officially open. Unsolved. The file sits somewhere in storage, collecting dust. I left the force in 1995. 11 years was enough. I became a security consultant, boring corporate work, normal patrol, quiet even. Around 4:30 in the afternoon, I got a call over the radio. Missing child report. 7-year-old boy, last seen around noon, expected home by 4 p.m. The address was on North Rhode Island Avenue. I responded that I was en route. Missing kids usually turned out to be nothing. They were at a friend's house and forgot to call home. They were playing and lost track of time. 9 times out of 10, they walked through the door while you were still taking the report. I wanted boring. I needed boring. But I still think about Gary Jr. all the time. I think about those 2 days researched while he was lying in that lot. I think about walking past that location multiple times, not knowing he was there just yards away. I think about the messages. Son of a pig officer. Payback is a MF. Someone killed a 7-year-old boy to hurt his father, beat him to death, and threw him in the weeds like trash. And whoever did it is still out there, still free. I'm 66 years old now. I've lived a long life. I have grandkids. I should be past this. I should have let it go decades ago. But sometimes I still drive past North California Avenue. The lots are developed now. Houses built where Gary Jr. was found. Families living there. Kids playing in the yards. They don't know. Nobody remembers anymore, except me. And Gary Sr., wherever he is. And Mrs. Grant. And the person who did it. They remember too. Sometimes late at night, I wonder if they drive past those houses. If they look at where they left him and feel anything at all. Guilt. Satisfaction. Fear. Or maybe they don't think about it at all anymore. Maybe for them, it was just a moment. Just a thing that happened on a January afternoon 40 years ago. But for Gary Sr., for his wife, for everyone who knew that little boy, it never ended. It's still happening, every day, every January 12th. Every time someone asks me about the cases I worked, and I say everything was routine, nothing special, because I can't talk about this one without my voice breaking. Gary Grant Jr. was 7 years old. He played basketball. He was the manager for his school team, the team his father coached. He was responsible. He always came home on time, until the one day he didn't. And we found him 2 days later in the weeds, less than half a mile from home, beaten to death, 7 years old. I'm sorry, Gary. I'm sorry we didn't find you in time. I'm sorry we didn't stop it. I'm sorry your killer never faced justice. I'm sorry. But something felt different about this one. I arrived at the address around 4:40. It was a modest row house, well-kept, small front yard. The door opened before I could knock. A woman stood there, Maybe early 30s, her face tight with worry. "Mrs. Grant?" I asked. "Yes. Have you found him?" "I just got here, ma'am." "Why don't you tell me what happened?" She let me in. The house was warm, clean, family photos on the walls, a basketball in the corner of the living room. Normal. Everything about it was normal. Gary Grant Sr. arrived while his wife was explaining. He was still in his work clothes, a patrol officer's uniform. Atlantic City PD, same as me. I recognized him vaguely. We worked different shifts, but I'd seen him around the station. His face was pale. His hands were shaking. "Anything?" he asked his wife. She shook her head. He turned to me. "My son's name is Gary Grant Jr. He's 7 years old. He's a good kid. Responsible. He always comes home on time." "When did you last see him?" "Around noon. He asked if he could go play with friends. I said yes, but he had to be home by 4. That's the rule. He's never broken it before. That's the rule. He's never broken it before. Mrs. Grant broke in. I called his friends. 2 of them said they played with him this afternoon, but he left around 4:30 to come home." I wrote that down. 4:30, so he should have been home within minutes. 5 minutes, Gary Sr. said. 10 at most. It's not a long walk. Did they say where he was going? What route? Just home. The same way he always comes. I asked for a description. Gary Jr. was tall for his age, wearing a blue jacket, jeans, sneakers, short hair. Big smile in the photo they showed me. "I'm going to call this in," I said. "We'll get more units out here. Start searching the route between here and his friends' houses." Gary Sr. nodded, but I could see something in his eyes. Fear. Real fear. The kind you see in combat veterans, not cops. He knew something was wrong. He could feel it. Within an hour, we had a dozen officers searching. We walked every street, every alley between the friend's house and the Grant home. We knocked on doors. We checked yards and garages and anywhere a kid might be. Nothing. By 8 p.m., we had expanded the search radius. Canine units arrived. Volunteers started showing up, neighbors, people from Gary Sr.'s church, other officers on their off time. Everyone walking in grids, calling Gary Jr.'s name. The temperature was dropping. It was January, mid-20s. If the kid was outside somewhere, hurt or lost, time was critical. I stayed with the family most of that first night. Mrs. Grant sat on the couch, staring at nothing. Gary Sr. couldn't sit still. He kept pacing, kept checking the window, kept asking if there was any news. Around 2 a.m., the search was called off until daylight. Not enough manpower to keep it going safely through the night. I told Gary Sr. we'd resume at first light. He just looked at me. "My son is out there somewhere." "I know. We're going to find him." But I wasn't sure I believed that anymore. I went home for 3 hours of sleep and was back at 6 a.m. The search resumed at dawn. More volunteers. More officers. We searched abandoned buildings, checked dumpsters, covered every inch of the surrounding blocks. I worked the closing shift at the rack shop in Old Bridge, New Jersey in the winter of 1999. I was 16, saving money for a car. It wasn't a great job, but it was easy restocking fabric, helping customers, straightening displays. Most nights I worked alone from 4 to 9 p.m. The store was in the strip mall off Route 516. Nothing fancy, but it stayed busy enough. Nancy Noga worked the same shifts I did, just different days. We overlapped sometimes on weekends. I thought it was a rumor, the kind of messed up thing people say for attention. But when I got to work that afternoon, the store was closed. There was a sign on the door, "Closed due to emergency." I called the manager from a payphone. She answered on the first ring. Did they really find her? Yes. Her voice was shaking. "This morning. In the woods near her apartment." "Is she? She's dead. That's all I know. The police are going to want to talk to everyone who worked with her again." I drove home in a daze. When I got there, my mom was watching the news. Nancy's picture was on the screen. The reporter was standing near a wooded area, yellow police tape visible behind her. discovered this morning by investigators searching the area. Police are calling it a homicide but have not released details about the cause of death. The 17-year-old Saraville High School senior had been missing since January 7th, when she failed to return home from her job at a local fabric store. My mom turned to look at me. "Isn't that where you work?" "Yeah." "Did you know her?" "A little." She muted the TV. "Are you okay?" I nodded, but I wasn't okay. I kept thinking about Nancy buying ribbon on Tuesday, laughing about something, being alive, and now she was dead. Detective Riley came back to the store 2 days later. He talked to everyone again. This time the questions were different, harder. He wanted to know about every customer I could remember from the week Nancy disappeared. Every car in the parking lot, every phone call to the store. I tried to help, but I didn't remember anything useful. It had been a normal week. Normal customers. Normal everything. "We're looking at everyone who had contact with Nancy in the days before she disappeared," Riley said. "Coworkers, customers, people in the area. Anything you remember, no matter how small, could help." "How did she die?" I asked. He looked at me for a long moment. "I can't discuss details of an active investigation." But later I heard things. People talk. Rumors spread. I heard she'd been beaten, stabbed. I heard her body had been moved, transported to where they found it. I heard she'd been put in a trash can. I don't know what was true and what wasn't. The police never released those details publicly. What I do know is that Nancy left work around 9 p.m. on January 7th. Sometime during the 15-minute walk home, someone took her, killed her, and dumped her body in the woods less than half a mile from her apartment. For 5 days, she was there, while her family was searching, while police were interviewing people, while I was restocking fabric and helping customers and going about my normal life. She was there the whole time. The store stayed open. We kept working. But it felt different. Customers would come in and get quiet when they saw Nancy's flyers still taped to the register. Some would ask if there had been any arrests. We have to tell them no. Weeks passed. Then months. No arrests, no suspects publicly named, just an ongoing investigation. I quit the rag shop that spring, told myself it was because I needed to focus on school. But really, I just couldn't stand being there anymore. Every shift, I'd think about Nancy walking out that door on January 7th. Every time I closed up at 9 p.m., I'd think about her doing the same thing. And I'd think about whoever was out there watching, waiting, because that's what scared me most. The randomness of it. Nancy wasn't doing anything unusual. She was walking home from work, something she'd done hundreds of times. Something I did multiple times a week. It could have been me. That's what I kept thinking. If I'd been working Thursday instead of Nancy, if I'd been the one walking home at 9 p.m. on January 7th, would I have made it, or would I be the one in the woods? I graduated high school in 2000, went to community college, got a job at a bank, normal life, safe life. But I never forgot about Nancy. Sometimes I'd search for updates online. Nancy Noga murder. Saraville unsolved homicide. I'd find old articles, forum posts, people speculating about what happened, but never any answers. The case went cold. Years passed. 10 years. 15. 20. I'm 39 now. I live in Edison, about 20 minutes from Old Bridge. I have a wife and 2 kids. My daughter is 16, the same age I was when Nancy died. Last month I was driving through Old Bridge and past the strip mall where the rag shop used to be. It's something else now, a dollar store. The whole area looks different. Newer buildings, different stores. But I still remember exactly where the rag shop was. I remember the layout. The break room where Detective Riley interviewed me. The register where Nancy's flyer hung for months. I pulled into the parking lot and just sat there for a while looking at the building. She was a year older than me, a senior at Saraville War Memorial High School. I was a junior at Old Bridge. We weren't close friends, but we talked. The kind of casual conversation you have with coworkers. She told me about college applications. I told her about trying to save up for a used Honda. Normal stuff. She was nice. Quiet, but nice. The kind of person who always said thank you when you helped her find something in the stockroom. My daughter asked what I was doing. I used to work here, I said. Cool, can we go? I didn't tell her about Nancy. What would I say? That a girl I barely knew was murdered 25 years ago and I still think about it? That I'm scared every time my daughter leaves the house because I know how quickly normal becomes nightmare? I started the car and drove home. But that night, I searched for Nancy's name again. I do this sometimes every few years, hoping to see a headline that says, "Arrest made" or "Case solved." Nothing, just the same old articles from 1999. The same basic facts. 17-year-old girl, missing January 7th. Found dead January 12th. Blunt force trauma. Stabbing. Body transported. No arrests. No suspects. No justice. I found something I hadn't seen before, though. Someone had created a memorial page for Nancy. Recent posts from people who knew her, her family, former classmates. One post was from her mother, dated 2 months ago. 25 years today since we lost you. We still miss you every day. We still wait for answers. We still hope someone knows something and will finally come forward. Please, if you know anything about what happened to Nancy, please call the police. Please help us find peace. 25 years. Nancy would be 42 now. She might have finished college, started a career, gotten married, had kids. She might have lived a whole life. Instead, she's frozen at 17. Forever walking out of the rag shop on a January night. Forever 15 minutes from home. I don't know why I can't let this go. I barely knew her. We worked together a few times. We had a handful of conversations. That's all. But I can't stop thinking about those 15 minutes. About what happened during that walk home. Who she saw. What she thought when she realized something was wrong. If she fought. If she screamed. If anyone heard. And I can't stop thinking about the person who did it. Where they are now. What they're doing. If they think about Nancy at all. Or if they've just moved on, living their life while Nancy's family still waits for answers. Sometimes late at night when my house is quiet and my family is asleep, I wonder if I passed Nancy's killer that January. In the store, in the parking lot, on the street. I wonder if it was someone ordinary, someone unremarkable, someone who blended in. Someone still out there. 25 years later, still free. I remember the last time I saw her. It was January 5th, 1999, a Tuesday. I was working 4 to 9, and she came in around 7 to buy ribbon for some school project. We talked for maybe 5 minutes. She asked if I was working Thursday. I said no, I had the night off. Lucky, she said, I'm closing. That was it. She paid for the ribbon and left. I went back to reorganizing the embroidery floss display. 2 days later, Nancy didn't come home from work. I didn't know about it right away. I had Thursday and Friday off that week. When I came back from my Saturday shift, there was a different manager working, someone from another store. She looked tired and kept checking her phone. Where's Mr. Kelso? I asked. He's dealing with something. Did you know Nancy Noga? The past tense hit me wrong. Did? She's missing. She left work Thursday night and never made it home. I felt cold. What do you mean missing? The police are looking for her. They might want to talk to you since you work here. I spent that whole shift in a fog. I kept thinking about Nancy walking out of the store Thursday night. It would have been around 9 p.m. when she finished closing. Dark, January, cold. The walk from the rag shop to her apartment complex was maybe 15 minutes. I'd never done it myself, but I'd seen the direction she headed when she left. North on Route 516, then east through a residential area. A 15-minute walk. On Monday, a detective came to the store. His name was Riley. He was maybe 40, with gray starting at his temples and tired eyes. He asked if he could talk to me. We sat in the break room. He had a notebook and a pen that he kept clicking. You worked with Nancy Noga? Yeah, not a lot, but sometimes. When was the last time you saw her? Tuesday, January 5th. She came in to buy ribbon. How did she seem? Normal. Fine. We talked for a few minutes. About what? School. Work. Nothing important. He wrote something down. Does she mention being worried about anything? Anyone bothering her? No, nothing like that. Did you notice anyone hanging around the store? Anyone paying attention to her? I thought about it. Really thought about it. No, I mean, we get regulars, but nobody weird. He asked me a few more questions. What time Nancy usually left, whether she walked or got picked up, if I knew her boyfriend. I told him everything I knew, which wasn't much. Nancy walked home most nights. Her boyfriend sometimes picked her up, but not always. I didn't know him. Detective Riley gave me his card and told me to call if I remembered anything else. After he left, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Nancy was missing. She'd walked out of this store, the same store I walked out of 3 or 4 times a week, and she just disappeared. The next few days were strange. Customers would come in and ask about Nancy. Had we heard anything? Was she okay? The manager put up a missing person flyer by the register with Nancy's photo and a phone number to call. I'd see that flyer every shift. Nancy's smiling. Have you seen this girl? On January 12th, they found her. I was at school when it happened. Someone told me between 3rd and 4th period, they found that girl from the rag shop. She's dead. I didn't believe it at first.